Morning, everyone. How to follow session about pitching. I'm worried that I will not be a rock star pitcher, but that's okay. So employee ownership. We're going to talk about employee ownership trusts, but beforehand, I just wanted to cover employee ownership generally as a concept. So we're seeing that there is a vogue of participatory business models. That is, rather than businesses operating for the benefit of shareholders, businesses operating for the benefit of other stakeholders, such as employees. GS30 is a multidisciplinary advisory business, help businesses across the accounting, legal, tax, and corporate finance implications of transactions. And so we see our clients, business owners, entrepreneurs, and management teams speak to us about how they incentivize their workforce with either the use of share schemes, looking at transactions in terms of exits around management buyouts, employee ownership trusts, which we'll talk about in detail, but also other ways of participation, such as profit shares and how businesses can change their articles to allow for circumstances like that. And if we think about the market and why participatory business models are in growth, there's a couple of things to think about. So over the course of the last 5-10 years, we've actually seen unemployment levels at record lows and not seen since the 70s, so 50 plus years, say for COVID. So the actual recruitment and retention of talent market is challenging. I'm sure you'll appreciate that as entrepreneurs, and we see that as business leaders and owners in our own right. So businesses have to think about how they differentiate themselves to retain that talent. And we've also spoken in a couple of sessions today around how purpose makes a difference. So we're seeing a rise in business owners looking at things like B Corps. We're seeing there culturally be a move towards people and planet before profits. And the employee ownership scene links it with some of these concepts. In terms of exit options, we talk about employee ownership trusts. And when we talk about that, whether that be a disposal to your employees through a trust in either a majority sense as a partial exit with a view to a future exit, an alignment of values, or as a full exit, i.e. a disposal to your employees with the employees taking the business forward with or without the founder or owner. So in terms of what is an employee ownership trust, it is a separate legal structure. So the trust operates as an entity, and that trust operates for the benefit of its beneficiaries, and its beneficiaries are the employees of the business. And those and the beneficiaries can be defined by certain benchmarks, i.e. time of length of service, the role, the elements of roles within the company, and how long they spend in terms of hours within the business. Once they hit a benchmark of those rules, they will then be participants and beneficiaries of the trust. I'll just cover this first. So that business, the business itself on the disposal to an employee ownership trust has to have a change in its constitution, because it will then be operating for the benefit of the trust rather than for individual shareholders. The trust itself has its own board, so it will have a board of trustees that operate for the benefit of that trust, and the trading business will have its own board and its own decision making, but they will have input from a member of either a trustee or an employee member of the employee member of the trust. And that's governed by the establishment of a trust deed alongside the establishment of the articles of the business that carries on trading. Employee ownership trusts have been around since 2014, and they were brought in as a cost-effective method of transferring ownership from direct shareholders to participation through employees. The rationale for there being a cost-effective method, we'll talk about the tax implications. The rationale for that from UK PLC is that employee-owned businesses, there's a body of research, tend to be more productive, and the percentage level of production based on the research we've seen is in the region of 8 to 10%. So that alignment of values, alignment of participation actually sees greater productivity, and that productivity supports the growth of our country in terms of UK PLC. This number of circles shows how a transaction would like that would work. We're not going to go into the detail of that today, but it'll just serve to say that in the interactions with the trust, you've got the company that disposes of its, that you've got the shareholders that dispose of their shares to the trust. You've got the company that will make profits, and those profits will be remunerated to the trust via a gift. And you've got profits that can be distributed via bonuses through to the employees. And in some cases, where there's a transaction that involves a cash payment out to the sellers or founders of a business, that can be funded either by cash from the company, from from external funding, or from the future profits of the company. So I'll just very quickly cover the kind of benefits that the Employee Ownership Association has shared. There's a huge body of research that gets updated every year. So if you're interested, I'd certainly signpost to the Employee Ownership Association to get that body of information through. As we've talked about, if you are selling your shares and the company becomes that the employees benefit from future profits of that company, you can see that it's a differentiator in terms of talent retention and recruitment. You can see that from an engagement perspective, given that employees then have a role and responsibility within the company with a representative on the board, then there's more engagement, there's more decision making that can help and shape what that company will do, its values, its culture, as well as its performance through time. That factors into increased productivity. I'll come on to tax specifically because we've got a quick slide on that. From a founders and owners perspective, from scale up through to maturity and then exit, you've been building a business with a culture and values and a mission and purpose. It's important for shareholders when they're considering their exit plans to determine, how do I make sure that this business is going to continue to operate and achieve that mission or enhance that mission into the future. And that's where building a team in your vision in terms of employees, rather than a transaction with and maybe an invested or uninvested third party that's truly financial, can lead to you being in control of what that legacy looks like for you as business owners. We've already covered in terms of influence decision making and benefits from company success. One thing I haven't covered is if the business was to be built and sold in the future, then the employees stand to benefit from that with a disposal of cash from the business to the trust and out to employees in the event of a future sale. This point on purpose, I think, is critical, because the purpose of going down the route of an employee ownership mechanism is to get those benefits and synergies of alignment between shareholders, directors, and employees through the course of trading and running a business. Tax. When I talked about the fact that it's a cost-effective route to disposal to employees, the key tax benefit for sellers is the fact that on the sale of shares, there is full relief from capital gains tax. Capital gains tax in terms of current reference rates, 20% and 10% on business asset disposal relief on the disposal of shares. This full relief for that taxation for business owners who are looking to dispose of their companies or partially dispose of their companies to their employees. The benefit for staff is that they get to receive bonuses that are tax-free up to a certain value. I won't rattle through this, but from a GS30 perspective, we're able to help with the tax, the accounting, the legal processes as you lead up to a transaction, at the point of a transaction, but also after that transaction has been executed. And with that, I'll hand over to Greg.
Joel, thank you. Thanks. Grab a seat. That'd be great. Thanks very much. That's a scene set about EOTs. I want to come to our three entrepreneurs. Each of you, Joanna, Nick, and Chris, have sold your businesses. I want to hear two things. One, what was your rationale? Actually, three things. What was your rationale? How did it work out in practice? I know, Joanna, it's very recent for you. And three, what alternative routes did you consider? So whilst you're cogitating that, perhaps whoever would like to go first.
Shall I go? Hi. So I'm Nick. I run a public policy research consultancy based just over the bridge in Monmouthshire. And we've got 25 staff. We've been established for quite a while. We've always been really values-led. We're very environmental and sustainability focused. We've got an A+ rated office. We've got a wind turbine, solar panels, pellet boiler, all this stuff. But we've always been quite weak on our governance. And I really wanted to be a more socially inclusive employer. And also, given my age, I was starting to think about an exit. So we looked at a number of things. I'd looked at kind of employee share options, which is fine if you've got a tech business and you're going to scale it and flog it in 5 years. Didn't really work for us. And we kind of stalled it for quite a long time until actually we went through the B Corp process. And when we went through the B Corp impact assessment, recognised we were pretty strong on everything except governance and kind of inclusivity in terms of our workforce. So we thought it was quite a good time to explore it again, and then we heard about the possibility of doing an EOT, went to the Employee Ownership Association, which was really helpful in terms of advice because we hadn't got a clue. And then we got some advice in South Wales, and they signposted us to GS Baird, and we went through the process. It was a lot of mental stress to begin with, I think, and possibly the biggest hurdle was valuation. I think valuation for services-led consultancy is a real issue, and the valuations I had varied by a factor of 10.
Can I interrupt you at that point? When it comes to valuations, in a sense, up to a point, when you're selling your own business, you're on both sides of that story.
Nightmare.
You want the management teams to have benefit, to run it, create further value, but also you want exiting value. So
exactly.
How did you navigate that? And I'll ask you each of that as well.
Okay, so at one end of the scale, with a low valuation, you've got no room for manoeuvre, and that was my problem with that. So actually, I put my hand in my pocket and went out and got a big consultancy to do a valuation, which was the tenfold one. That enabled me to say, okay, we're going to do this thing, with the team. I'm going to give a 50% discount to start with on the valuation, and then we'll do a 60% ownership transfer. And that was really helpful because it gave me a better return on my shares, but also it was a much more attractive package in terms of how we got the deal through. So that was quite a challenge. But then the next phase was we had no idea about how to do any of the legals and stuff. And these guys, I have to say this is their event, but they were genuinely really, really helpful in terms of getting that through, and the process was really smooth. I think the final thing was that once you've achieved that, there's then a slight pause, and you've got a bit of a cultural issue unless you're really careful, because everyone's going, wow, we're employee owned, fantastic, right? It's going to be like sort of an anarcho-syndicalist collective now, we're going to do all this. And you have to say, well, actually, no, the management is still the same, this is about governance. And, we're 2 years in now, nearly, 1.5 years in, and, we're going through quite a lot of cultural discussion in terms of just what this means. And, after the initial euphoria, we're putting together a 5-year plan that really enables people to understand how this is going to benefit them in the long term, because there is that quick dopamine hit, which is the tax-free bonuses, fantastic. But, people really need to understand that this isn't a quick fix. This is a long-term game.
Yeah. Thank you. Joanna, yours is a much more recent experience. March or so this year?
January.
Yeah. There you go. 6 months of that order. How was your rationale different, if it was different at all, to what you said?
There are similarities, and I think us being a B Corp certified business 3 or 4 years ago now definitely made me start thinking about this as an idea. In the same sort of way as you, I was starting to think about kind of longer term succession planning, and I would say, EOTs or employee ownership, it's not an immediate I'm selling and I'm getting out. And a few people have emailed me after and said, oh, what are you doing now you've retired? And I'm like, don't put me out to pasture yet, I'm not finished. So actually what it's done for me is give me a long term look ahead at sort of 5 to 7 maybe plus years over succession planning, thinking about an exit longer term. I looked at thinking about that, what my exit might be in the future, thinking about a trade sale. I'm not particularly interested in then kind of going into a big corporate and then doing an earn out. I kind of, for me, the lifestyle elements of work and being an entrepreneur, it tends to be kind of pretty much of a personal experience. So I considered all of those sorts of things that weren't necessarily right for us. I think where we differ to you, Nick, slightly is that our governance was pretty good. I felt that was well established, and for us, I think we actually had the culture in place for an EOT or for employee ownership, and it looked like a great vehicle to enable us to really embed that in a way that I had tried to bring, I suppose, little bits of motivate people to get more involved in the future success of the business through share options, through profit bonuses and things. But actually, you don't have skin in the game in the way that you do as an employee owner. So it's been a really exciting way of shifting our culture, and actually in a way that I think business needs to level up a little bit, because it's quite a hierarchical traditional structure.
Slightly more democratises the whole idea of how business is structured. Chris, your experience is slightly different in this structural respect, and unless I've got this wrong with Ovation, I think you may still be a shareholder, but you're not operative. You're not an executive inside the businesses, whereas the other two panelists they've sold a chunk, however that works out, but they're active in the business. You're not. And you were early stage with EOTs, when you were thinking about it, give us your rationale and that point of difference about no longer being executive within the organisation.
Well, you assume that was my decision.
I'm floating away.
Ovation Finance over in Queen Square's financial planning company, and in 2017, I went to a meeting of the Employee Ownership Association and absolutely blew my mind, because all the options I'd seen for exiting meant my business was going to be in some way wound up. It would either be sold to a big corporate who would probably sack most of the staff and do a much worse job than we were doing. Possibly a management buyout, but that probably was just a stepping stone to a corporate sale. And my ego said, I want my business to continue. I want a legacy. I want to leave this. It does cool things. So I saw a presentation and about EOTs and just said, that is the thing for me. I then went and did all the things that I would now tell you not to do. So I made the mistake so you don't have to. I did it too quickly. I didn't realise that I was the problem. What do you mean by that? Owners are the biggest barrier to growth in many small businesses. A lot of was that an agreement or a disagreement? Yeah, a few. Yeah. So you hear a lot of people say my employees just aren't stepping up. What they really mean is, what I always say to them is, that's because you haven't got off the step. I had many. So I just to finish the story, I wrote a book. I spoke to lots of business owners. I interviewed loads of people. I wrote a book called The Eternal Business, which came out in 2018. And I now advise businesses on doing the things that I didn't do. And the main lesson I try and say to them is two things. Number one, your job as a business owner is to make yourself the least important person in your business. Because if you're the most important person, you can't leave. You can't sell it. So that means doing all sorts of things about empowerment. Empowerment means letting somebody make a mistake. It doesn't mean what I used to think of as empowerment, which was do what I tell you to do, but I'm going to let you do it. No. Empowerment is letting them make the decision and actually do the thing. And even if they get it wrong, let them get it wrong. Because I made all my lessons because I made mistakes. So let them do it too. That's not an easy thing to actually put into practice. So getting out of the way is probably my biggest number one tip. The second tip I would say for any business, it isn't just EOT, any business you want to carry on beyond you, not just be sold to a third party, which is absolutely fine if that's what you do want. But if you want your business to continue beyond you, you need to create a different kind of culture. An employee-owned business does not work, think, and act like a privately owned business. And I'll give you one very quick example just to directly answer your point, Greg. I said to the employees, I suspect like you guys did, look, I'm around if you want me. And then it was going, hello, I'm around if you want me. And they said, well, you've always done the marketing. Why don't you be part of the marketing committee? So I'm still chair. I'm still a minority shareholder. I still go to board meetings, but I then also went to the marketing meetings. And I tried to be really good, and I was a good boy and didn't say too much, just tried to be one of them. And then after 6 months, the MD that replaced me, Adrian, took me aside and said, I'd like you to step off the marketing committee. And I said, why? He said, because you're dominating. I said, I'm not. I'm trying so hard to just, be quiet. And not. He said, no. I know you're trying hard, I can tell that, but the last meeting, you sat there for an hour and didn't really say anything, and then you had to leave early for another meeting. After you left, everybody started talking. Because I was the founder, and I'd been the boss. And so just me being in the room was enough to stop people stepping up. So you need to understand that the culture of an employee-owned business works in all sorts of different ways. Governance, as Nick touched on, but also the role of the founder. Founders can carry on, that's cool, but you've got to be very careful of what your role is and how everybody else sees their roles. So I could talk for ages, but I'll stop there.
I think maybe this is just me, a bit of projecting. I think it's some uncomfortable truths lurking there, but anyway. Well, be true. I'm not looking for any beauty fast person to respond. Joel, if I can come to you from a structural point of view or process point of view, the two very broadly different structures of selling to the management team and effectively exiting the executive role as opposed to maintaining the executive role, it's only inherent difference.
Are we talking about the difference between management buyouts and employee ownership?
No, I'm still talking about employee ownership trust. I mean, does it actually make any difference to process, in your experience, whether you have, A, experience of, that's it, guys, you're running it, or alternatively B, of staying within and being an executive within it?
I think the process post-transaction, so as you lead up to an employee ownership transaction, you've got the dynamics of thinking about the process and the exit, and if you're doing this properly, you're not just thinking about that transaction as the point in which you've achieved your plan. You're thinking about, well, actually, what happens from that point forward, and what are the roles and responsibilities of both the founder. Are they part of that board? Do they move into a chair style role where they allow the business, the management team, to deliver the decisions of the business, or are they going to carry on acting as a managing director with the view of continuing to train those management teams up over time to take on those roles and responsibilities?
Which is individual in all cases about life stage, personal interest, etc., I would guess, but not from a process point of view.
From a process point of view, the point to consider, there isn't a difference apart from you have a board of directors on the trading business, and you need, through the lead up towards the transaction, to think of who are those decision makers going to be, within or without. So you can always bring non-executives in that have familiarity with employee ownership to help deliver that transition of how the business should trade post-transaction. And that differs from the people that need to be appointed as trustees for the benefit of the trust and the beneficiaries of the trust being employees, because they need to make decisions and get the information from employees around transition and feed that into the board. So there is, you've almost got two boards, two structures, but they should all be aligned if the vision is set from the outset.
Very good, that's helpful. Quick throw open to our audience. We've got time's against us, 6 minutes or so to go. So a couple of quick questions. Otherwise, I'm going to move to... Yes, we have. Yeah, Christoph, deadline knowledge. Yeah.
It's really a question about the employees themselves. Because as an entrepreneur, you go through that kind of, oh, crikey, I'm really doing this thing, and there's a bit of risk involved, and there's all that kind of shaky stuff. What happens to the employees when they suddenly become part owners in a trust?
Does their psychology change? To the way they operate change as well?
Yeah, I think that was what I was trying to describe in a way. I mean, I think my experience has been they've been through a process. At first, one of kind of, we're not really sure what's happening with this. There's some kind of transfer, and then we have lots of comms and lots of discussions about it. But then the actual transfer happens, and then we broadened our management group, so it was much more democratic. And I think everybody wanted to take on lots of responsibility and understand about running the business, which was great. And I've tried to distance myself a bit and become almost like an internal consultant, so I'm away from a lot of the management groupings now, but still kind of keep an eye on it and just try and provide guidance when it's wanted. But I do think now we're kind of starting to refocus a little bit now and come down to where people have individual responsibilities. But I've allowed that to happen quite organically, and I think that's been quite important in terms of everybody understanding what the process is they're going through. And now people are starting to see it much more long term and we're trying to sort of look at 5-year horizons rather than kind of 2 or 3 year horizons, for example. That's been my experience. I don't know about
others. Early stage for you with Purple Fish and the team. Any responses from the team? How they are
Yeah, we tried to, well, not tried to, we were very intentional about taking them along the journey, right from the decision to pursue an EOT structure. And that was really important to me as the founder, and looking at that legacy was that I knew that I really had to take them along and they had to be supported through that, because I didn't know anything about EOTs until I've done one, and now I know a little bit more. But it's not an easy thing to get your head around. So from an employee's perspective, we spent quite a long time thinking about what they would need, and from very early stage started to engage them in meetings, had quite a lot of educational kind of workshops, Q&As, and gave them as much information as we could to really support them through that process. And that's really helped. And it's also then post-EOT, it feels like it's sort of hard baked into the DNA, and we have shifted the culture a little bit, which is what I wanted to see. But it's been quite an exciting process, and hopefully not a daunting one from their perspective. But that was all very much about laying everything out really, really clearly from the outset and giving them opportunities to say, well, I'm going to become an owner. Do I need to put money in? As an example of a question. Good question. The answer's no, but why? So really giving people full context, because we've got people who are 21-year-old graduates right up to new management team, new MD in her 40s. So actually there's a lot of kind of wisdom and experience that you need to go through and really cater to everyone. So we spent a lot of time really thinking about that.
It's the runway, as Phil was saying. And Chris, from your point of view, yes, the team absolutely changed. They changed to the extent of changing you.
Yeah. That was my choice, I will just say. Look, it's a great question, and you've both said some really positive stuff, and if you get it right, it is really, really positive. There's a huge boost in all sorts of things. But if you don't get it right, if you don't do the preparation, it can go horribly wrong. And I could give many examples, but I'll just give one, which we call the fairness dragon. You unleash the fairness dragon. So before the sale, you're the owner. Everybody knows that's how it works. You set it up, you took the risk, you take the profit. That's absolutely fine. Post-sale, you're going to take all the profit to get you paid out. And I had one guy who said to me, so hang on, let me get this straight. All the profit for the next 10 years is going to go to you to pay you out. Thanks very much. Well, great. And I said, yeah, but that's the same as now. You're literally no worse off. And if the business grows, you'll get the extra. He eventually resigned. So, I said I made mistakes so you don't have to. That was one of them. So once you unleash the fairness dragon and people start looking at the numbers and understanding the numbers, which is a really positive thing if you do it right, you do get the hang on a minute. If we're spreading the profit amongst us all, why are they getting more than me? That's not fair. So you do need to take time, both pre-sale, but we also work with companies post-sale as well, to get that culture right. If you do get it right, it's really, really positive.
It's really, really positive to consider an EOT structure. And we're going to close this by just putting out we've got from an after syndicate actually to the dopamine effect to unleashing the fairness dragon. So I would like, on your behalf, to thank Chris, Joanna, Nick, and especially Joel from Geotherde. Two things here. We will have this presentation, quite longer form presentation, will be on the Entrecom side. Likewise, we'll have the questionnaire about EOT each. Thank you very much. Thank you.